Hello, welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you were watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I've got breaking news coming out regarding the Ukraine war to share with all of you, and I want to talk more about whether this war could potentially come to an end here in the next few months. We've got a new report just breaking today. Trump orders special envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, to end the war in 100 days. Okay, so it looks like we do have a deadline now as Keith Kellogg is going to be tasked with ending this war within 100 days. So that's approximately about 3 months or so. 3 to 4 months, I guess, is kind of how we could speculate some of these numbers here. So we're looking at maybe like April or May at the latest that this war should be over with, at least according to this deadline. Now, will this actually happen? Who knows? Many people believe that he's not going to be very successful at ending this war. That Putin, is not open to negotiations. He wants this war to continue, wants to destroy Ukraine, whatever it might be. But I want to talk some more about this today, and I've got a good article that talks about all this information regarding this 100 days that Keith Kellogg has to try to end this war. We'll also talk about some of the peace plan and the key talking points in regards to this plan that Keith Kellogg could be unfolding to present to Ukraine and Russia. And then also, we're going to talk a little bit about some of Russia's demands, some of their key points on things that they're requesting at the same time. So it's definitely not going to be an easy task for Keith Kellogg to end this war, but let's go ahead and discuss this, okay? So let's go ahead and jump on over here to the Kiev Post. Reality bites. Trump tells Kellogg to end war in Ukraine in 100 days. The Wall Street Journal says the new president gave the new deadline to his special envoy to Ukraine, despite most, especially those in the Kremlin, saying it is unachievable. This is coming out today, January 22nd, 2025. Here's a photo of Trump and Keith Kellogg. It says right here, U.S. President Donald Trump now realizes that achieving a peaceful resolution to the war in Ukraine is going to be much more difficult than his optimistic prognosis both before and during the election campaign. Unnamed sources have told the Wall Street Journal that. In Wednesday, in a Wednesday article, the publication says Trump has set retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, his special envoy to Ukraine, a 100-day deadline to end the war in Ukraine. The former Army commander was chosen for the post based on the peace plan that he had come up with last year. The Wall Street Journal and many others believe that because Russia has already called Kellogg's roadmap a non-starter and the special envoy a relic of the Cold War, he will have little or no chance of succeeding unless Trump himself takes the lead in any negotiations. Most commentators believe Kellogg got the job because Trump was dazzled by his military record. Trump also liked the thrust of his ideas for achieving peace to the degree that he was willing to overlook his lack of diplomatic training or experience. Others are more disparaging, saying that Kellogg is little more than a yes man. An unnamed member of the U.S. National Security Council is cited by the Wall Street Journal saying Trump enjoys his Kellogg's company and sees him as a loyal guy, but he has never had any significant political influence. He certainly won't come up with anything that deviates from what Trump is trying to achieve. So it talks a little bit here about the peace plan coming from Keith Kellogg, and it says here the plan Kellogg came up with last year, first published by the America First Policy Institute, or AFPI, was based on a carrot and stick approach to get Russia and Ukraine to both come to the negotiating table. In summary, the key points of the plan were: here's the first one, both sides should agree to a ceasefire and attend peace talks. Both Switzerland and Slovakia have offered to host any negotiations. The front line would be frozen at its current position, with neither side having to cede territory, but accepting the principle that occupied Ukrainian regions could be returned through future diplomatic agreement. So this appears to be a really big one. I think most likely this will be part of the finalized agreement, is kind of just freezing the front line. The territories that Russia currently controls would just kind of be given over to Russia, whether that be temporarily or permanently. Obviously, Ukraine's been coming out a lot. Vladimir Zelensky saying that they would not recognize any territory as Russian territory, and they would eventually return to these regions. So I think I don't know how they're going to resolve that in terms of this conflict opening back up again later. So that's going to get interesting. The U.S. will continue to arm Ukraine only if it agrees to participate in negotiations. The outgoing Biden administration ramped up arms supplies in December to put Kyiv in the strongest possible negotiating position. A proposal to partially lift sanctions against Russia would be made to encourage Moscow to take part in peace talks. So it looks like we could see some sanctions being lifted for Russia as well, if that happens to be the case. Russia would be warned that if it refused to negotiate, the U.S. would increase its level of support to Ukraine. Trump implied on January 22nd, 21st news conference that he would consider increasing sanctions against Moscow if it did not play ball. We did hear about that yesterday. That is true. Trump did tell that to some reporters while he was signing some executive orders. He was stating that if they had to imply some more sanctions onto Russia and potentially even tariffs, they'll do so. And I actually have a new statement from Trump today on this war talking about that, him threatening tariffs and sanctions on Russia if need be. Ukraine's membership to NATO could be postponed for a long period of time to encourage Russia to participate in negotiations, and Kiev would be offered a comprehensive peace agreement with security guarantees by the U.S. Ukraine's position is that NATO membership must remain on the table. So that's a big one, right? NATO membership for Ukraine. I don't know how they're going to resolve that one because Ukraine really wants to get into NATO. They're pushing very hard for that to be the case, even though they're running into a lot of hurdles and possibly even major delays down the road. We're talking up to 20 years or longer, depending on what kind of agreement happens here. But Ukraine wants to get into NATO as soon as possible, while at the same time, Russia does not want Ukraine into NATO. Funds for the restoration of Ukraine could be obtained through the introduction of a tax on the import of Russian energy resources. Okay, so these are just some of the key talking points or positions for the peace plan coming from Keith Kellogg. Now we'll talk about Russia's preconditions here. As much of the analysts' concerns about the viability of the Kellogg peace plan is based on positions that President Vladimir Putin stated in June, and which other senior Kremlin figures have consistently taken. These were restated as recently as Monday during an online meeting of Russia's Security Council. Many of these positions directly conflict with the U.S. proposals. While Putin said he was open to dialogue with Trump's new administration, this could only take place if Russian interests were respected and that the unspecified root causes of the war were addressed. We've been hearing a lot about that recently, about the root causes of the war in terms of the Russians. Even Sergei Lavrov came out talking about that again today, saying they need to address the root causes of this war. In summary, the Kremlin's preconditions, which are viewed by most commentators as a demand for Kiev's capitulation, include any ceasefire would only be possible if it were more than just freezing the fighting, but aimed at a final binding resolution that causes to the causes of the war. Okay, so they want a complete freezing of the war, making sure that it does not open back up again, that this would be like a final end to the war. But again, that one's going to be tough. I'm not sure how they're going to resolve that, but it's definitely going to be a major hurdle. Russia would not negotiate over the 4 regions of Ukraine that are now part of Russia: Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia Oblast, including those parts Moscow does not currently control, which Putin now says is in response to its citizens' calls for self-determination in accordance with Moscow's interpretation of the UN Charter. Okay, so they're not going to be willing to negotiate over any of the regions that they have taken, okay? All these 4 regions here. Simple delay to Ukraine joining NATO, no matter how long, was unacceptable. Kiev should abandon all plans to join the alliance and declare itself a neutral country. Okay, that's going to be just absolutely very difficult step there, trying to get Ukraine to pull out of their attempts to get into NATO and declare itself a neutral country. I mean, we do know that Russia does not want NATO on its doorstep. But we know that Ukraine wants to get into NATO, okay? And at the same time, we have Finland, who's right on the border, and that's a NATO nation as well. So Ukraine must enact legal guarantees to respect and protect the rights and interests, including the language and culture of its Russian-speaking minorities, and all sanctions against Russia must be lifted. Okay, some pretty major demands coming from Russia. Definitely Keith Kellogg's going to have his hands full for the next 3 months trying to figure out how to end this war. Some commentators are concerned that Moscow will interpret Trump's demand to end the war and bring it into peaceful conclusions as overeagerness to secure peace at any price, which would be to Russia's advantage and Ukraine's disadvantage. Such concerns have reinforced the pessimistic view that Kellogg will be unable to square the circle between the two sides and secure any peace, much less just one. Okay, so definitely a longer report, guys. I want to thank you so much for hanging in there with me. But lots of good information on that article talking about this, how difficult it's going to be for Keith Kellogg to end this war. And who's going to get the better end of the stick here? Is it going to be Ukraine that's going to come out on top here, or is Russia going to come out on top? Or worst case scenario, is this war not going to end? Things are going to get much worse over here, probably much more bloody and deadly. And then at the same time, the U.S. going to ramp up sanctions and tariffs on Russia like crazy. Is this going to collapse their economy? If that's the case, we already know the Russian economy is not doing good right now. So there's so many different scenarios that could really play out here. But let me show you one last thing over here on X before we get you out of here. This is from Charlie Kirk. Pitch perfect message from President Trump to Russia: end the war and stop the killing. Okay, so this was a new post from Donald Trump today on his Truth Social platform. You can see the date down here, January 22nd, 2025. And he said, I'm not looking to hurt Russia. I love the Russian people and always had a very good relationship with President Putin. This despite the radical left's Russia, Russia, Russia hoax. We must never forget that Russia helped us win the Second World War, losing almost 60 million lives in the process. All of that being said, I'm going to do Russia, whose economy is failing, and President Putin a very big favor. Settle now and stop this ridiculous war. It's only going to get worse if we don't make a deal, and soon. I have no other choice but to put high levels of taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on anything being sold by Russia to the United States. Okay, that could be very devastating for the Russian economy, all at a time where they're struggling right now, and various other participating countries. Let's get this war, which should have never would have started if I were president, over with. We can do it the easy way or the hard way, and the easy way is always better. It's time to make a deal. No more lives should be lost. Okay, so it looks like something big is coming from Donald Trump here very soon. I mean, already since he's gotten in office, he's already come out swinging, signing so many different executive orders, undoing a lot of things that President Biden had currently for the United States when he was in office. And just the way he's handling this war, the way he's talking is completely different how Joe Biden was before as well. So definitely Donald Trump putting major pressure on Vladimir Putin to get him to make a deal here. We'll see what happens, but I think it's nonetheless going to be a very difficult scenario to kind of resolve here, an issue with Ukraine and Russia. But the fact that he's willing to put these major sanctions and taxes and tariffs, I mean, that's got to hurt Russia's economy immensely, and all at a time right now where major sanctions were just put on Russia right before Joe Biden got out of office. The U.S. Treasury put heavy sanctions on Russia's oil and energy sector, even targeting all their shadow fleet of vessels. So, major hammering to Russia's economy right now. And is this a possibility that this could get Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table with Ukraine and make a deal? We'll have to see what happens, but let me know what you think down below. That's going to be it for today's update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless, and we'll see you in the next one.